G's, no design on my jacket. Work hard, now I'm changing my bracket. Talk tough, we ain't hearing that racket. Dots came in, you know how to stack it. Don't take it wrong, but I'ma need my ends though. I got tigers on my chest like Kenzo. Rail came, yeah, he putting that Benz though. Carol's here, man, you know he stay 10 toes. Big dog, man, you know I ain't worried. Bent up, so I'm talking real slurry. Got a blast, bro.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How we doing, baby? This is Adam Caplan, the voice in your ears with AC Radio. And you know what to do, baby. It's Sunday. We're in the studio right now. We're recording. It's Tuesday right now for y'all. Hope you're having a good day. A little bit coarse in the voice right now because I went to the Montreal Alouettes game with the Autumn boys over on Saturday at the 4 p.m. game. And, you know, the Owls ended up winning on the last play of the game, the Canadian Football League, the CFL, for those of you that don't know, in the States or Europe. And, you know, for a couple of Montreal boys from the West Island to go down there, have a couple of drinks, and then see the Owls win on the last play, we were definitely screaming our hearts out. So forgive me if it's a little bit of a hard listen due to my voice, but I doubt that anyway. So let's get right into it. You know, first thing we're going to get into, we have Jake Paul confirming that his next fight is going to be in October, and he's going to fight at 185 pounds, which I love that decision. That shows me two things. One of them, he learned from his mistakes. He realizes that trying to suck down heavyweights to 200 pounds is not going to be a way to build your career, number one, because these guys are just going to disrespect you and show up overweight and try to knock your head off. And two, you know, that's just not the way the game of boxing goes. If you're just constantly going to be on a pursuit to suck bigger fighters down to your weight class, you're never going to be able to build that respect and clout in the fight game. So, you know, that's reason number one. Reason number two is shows that he's maybe trying to make a move down to the light heavyweight division. Maybe he wants to go down to 175 eventually, so he's doing it intelligently. He's going to drop down first by about 5 pounds to 185, then maybe gradually 180, and then the next thing you know, perhaps he'll be fighting at light heavyweight. But I'm sure him and his camp do have some concerns because the number one thing that Jake Paul gets the most credit for is that devastating right hand. Will it still be there when Jake Paul continues to cut more weight? We don't know. We also don't know if he'll be able to land that right hand as well as he has been if the level of competition keeps rising. So it's an interesting move. I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to be there for Jake at 185 and what is the motive behind moving down 5 pounds. And, you know, to a lot of folks, 5 pounds perhaps isn't that much, but people got to understand that in the fight game, 5 pounds is actually quite a lot, especially in boxing when there's more weight classes. You know, so big move for Jake. We'll see what happens in October. I think that KSI fighting two fighters, or, you know, one of them a rapper, Swarms or whatever the fuck his name is, versus, and on one fight of the night, and then the second one is now going to be against a pro-Mexican boxer who I believe is 2-5. He was supposed to fight a Russian or a Belarusian fighter before, but he got pulled off the card due to some controversial tattoos. So see you later, buddy. You ruined your 15 seconds of fame. Ciao. And, you know, KSI's got a new opponent now. And I think that, you know, maybe that is rubbing off on Jake Paul a little bit, realizing like maybe I don't need to go after the Tommy Fumbles, or maybe I don't need to go after someone with, you know, a little bit more clout in a name. Folks just want to see me perform against pro boxers. But I doubt that, because Jake Paul did, in fact, tweet that he was going to be fighting a boxer with a winning record. And, you know, probably take a similar route to what Tommy Fury did against Daniel Buchansky. As some of you already know, if you've listened to AC Radio, you do know why, in fact, they did choose Daniel Buchansky for Tommy Fury, because he was a seasoned fighter with a great record, but didn't have a hell of a lot of skill. And I think that that's what Jake Paul is going to be going after next at 185 pounds in October. So stay tuned. The circus continues. The entertainment era in boxing is still here, ladies and gentlemen. Brace yourselves. And let's get into some UFC talk, baby. We had Kamaru Usman versus Leon Rocky Edwards last night. And holy camole, what could I say? I mean, never say never in the sport of MMA. As it didn't look like it was going in Leon Rocky Edwards' favor in that fifth round with 56 seconds left, switching into that southpaw stance, showing that left hand, having Kamaru Usman bite on it, and then ripping that left roundhouse kick to the head. Lights out in Salt Lake City, baby. Leon Rocky Edwards is now the champion. Look at me now. And, look, I mean, Leon came out and won that first round. He stuffed Kamaru Usman's takedown. He then took down Kamaru Usman for the first time in his career, which typically is a bad sign when you're watching a champion defend his title and an opponent is able to get a feat like that, especially a wrestler, like a takedown. You know that, we're in maybe for a little bit of a surprise. Then in the end of the first round, Leon Edwards ended up taking Usman's back. Was he going to get the rear naked choke? He was close, but not close enough. Maybe the commentary was right that he needed to switch over the leg lock and switch over to the other side in order to sink in the choke. But, just being able to hone that position against one of the pound for pound best fighters in the world in Kamaru Usman is a big, big feat in itself. Then came the second round. You started to see that Leon Edwards was getting a little bit heavy, was landing a little bit on the feet, but not enough. Kamaru Usman took advantage of that with his wrestling and ended up, winning the round due to his wrestling, but didn't do all of that much. Still felt that the second was close. But then when that third and fourth came on, you could really see that Leon Edwards was, a touch discouraged, but more so out of his element due to the altitude in Salt Lake City. And, being under the bright lights of the Ultimate Fighting Championship on a UFC pay-per-view, so that was starting to catch up with him in the third and fourth. But one thing about Kamaru Usman in his wrestling is that he's not active enough. He holds guys up against the cage, hits them with those pitter-patter knees to the hips, a little bit of knees to the quads to give a Charlie horse a little bit of foot stomps, but doesn't really do anything all that significant, which is fine because it comes down to control. But at the end of the day, fans want to obviously see a fighter be more active, especially in those grappling exchanges. But more so, you're also giving your an opponent an opportunity to rest, whether or not they're doing anything to advance that position or get themselves out of it. And, you could see after that fourth round, Kamaru Usman was very, very tired. And although Leon Edwards was sitting on the stool and Usman wasn't, Usman was leaning, hugging Trevor Whitman while catching his breath. And Leon Edwards was sitting on the stool, appeared fatigued, obviously, and discouraged. But, what blew my mind was the commentary. The UFC commentary team made it seem as if, Leon Edwards was done. This fight was a write-off. He's discouraged. He's exhausted. He has nothing to bring to the table. Meanwhile, Kamaru Usman was sitting there, holding on to Trevor Whitman for dear life. And, although he showed that he was in control, showed that fatigue was hitting him as well. And he wasn't getting the same type of flack or criticism. So, the commentary team was really biting into that pound for pound great stuff, which I understand why they were. But the way that they were really writing off Leon Rocky Edwards didn't sit right with me. Felt like they needed to keep it a little bit realer than that. And then in that fifth round, he sets up that left hand. He sets up that left roundhouse kick. Bang, that's all she wrote. Kamaru Usman is no longer the champ. Leon Rocky Edwards is now your new welterweight champion. And let's just say, Jorge Masvidal has entered the chat, baby. When Leon Edwards was sitting back in that southpaw stance, landing those knees to the body and was just so successful upon switching stances and then made Usman have to rely on his wrestling more than his boxing, which he's been so confident about, like I said, you could start to feel like something was a brewing in the air, and that's exactly what happened. And, like I said, maybe Jorge Masvidal has entered the chat, but I doubt it. I mean, listen, the whole Masvidal-Leon Edwards thing, or the whole Masvidal entering the welterweight title talk, kind of reminds me of Conor McGregor. We see all of these fantastic top welterweights and lightweights do work at the top of the pool and, are fighting and clawing their way to get to those title fights. And then guys like Masvidal or McGregor, write a simple tweet or a specific matchup opens up for them that is more favorable. And now all of a sudden it seems like the money fight is going to slip through the cracks and take over those title fights. But I don't know. Given Masvidal's resume lately, it is a little bit difficult to slot him in there for the title. I think that Usman's going to get the rematch. I think that Colby is definitely next in line if Usman doesn't get it. And then obviously Chimaev is out there howling at like a wolf, waiting for this title shot. So my order of who's next for Leon Edwards is Usman, then Colby Covington, and then Chimaev. But it would be interesting to see if Jorge Masvidal could somehow, some way take that 3-piece in a soda on his way to a title shot against Leon Rocky Edwards. But I digress. Will they take the money fight? Who knows? Then next up in the co-main event, last fight of the day, we're going to talk about, fight of the night rather, Luke Rockhold versus Paulo Costa. Interesting fight because there was a lot of stuff going on leading up to this fight. I mean, you have the controversial Paulo Costa with his funny Twitter account. He's drinking his secret juice the whole time due to the fact that he's making jokes about drinking this secret juice, and he's bodied up completely, looks like he's built like a statue. USADA shows up at his door the morning of on the weigh-ins when he's cutting weight to do blood. I don't know if any of you have ever taken a blood test when you're dehydrated, but it's essentially trying to take, fucking jam into a needle, something very, very thick, not very liquidy, and extracting it from something is very difficult and painful. So, Costa wasn't too happy with USADA. Luke Rockhold wasn't happy with Costa. He wasn't happy with the UFC. He wasn't happy with Dana White. I don't think he was happy with the diner in Salt Lake City that didn't cut the crust off his tuna sandwich. He was just on a fucking roll, Luke Rockhold. Had choice words to say, something about OG, Shawnee Mack, who works for Full Send MMA, telling him to do his fucking homework for buying a luchador mask to Marlon Chito Vera, who's in fact Ecuadorian. So, Luke Rockhold was on one and really showed like he had a chip on his shoulder. And, then that matchup happened and, Luke came out looking dangerous, such a big frame, such a big body. I forgot how huge he is in that octagon. But, after Costa took him down, you could see that it sucked the wind out of him. Luke Rockhold had nothing after Costa took him down and really ground and pounded him and really controlled him on the canvas. And then, once that second round came about, you could see in Rockhold's facial expressions, first of all, his nose was broken, but his mouth was hanging down to the floor. He looked completely exhausted. You could see that the age, the miles, and the altitude was really getting to him. And, then made for a bit of a sloppy fight. And Paulo Costa played to that level. Didn't rise above Luke Rockhold's level, played exactly into it. Luke Rockhold would throw one or two single powerful kicks or punches. Paulo Costa would return with it. And that was pretty much the notion of the fight. And, the biggest highlight of it is that Luke Rockhold was in Paulo Costa's guard and was busted wide open on top of him and was rubbing his forehead full of blood all over Costa's face. So the only consolation that Luke Rockhold got from this is whatever he was trying to prove in the lead up of the fight of what kind of balls he has or what kind of chutzpah he has or what kind of man he is by stepping in there with a top 6 contender in Paulo Costa. Yeah, okay. If that's what he was trying to prove, he did that in fact. And, if he thought that he was going to bust Costa open and leave him down on the canvas staring up at the lights, wasn't really the case, but if it's any consolation, you did, rub your bloody face on top of your opponents. So, all power to Luke Rockhold. I have tremendous respect for him. I definitely think he's a top 15 or a top 10 greatest middleweights of all time in MMA. An amazing, a fighter with great attributes, long, lean, great kickboxing, great jiu-jitsu, great wrestling, good work ethic, kid's got a good look to him, or the man's got a good look to him. Luke Rockhold had all of that, but, his body language showed similar body language that we saw in the Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler fight. As much as he wanted to prove something to everybody, it showed without telling us that I think this career and time in your life has ran its course. And, I congratulate Luke Rockhold on an emphatic career. UFC middleweight champion, won in devastating fashion against Chris, the All-American Weidman, at UFC 194. It's been a great career. I understand that Luke has always had a chip on his shoulder because of that knockout to Vitor Belfort while he was juiced to the absolute gills. And, secondly, at the fact that he came up with guys like Cain Velasquez, came up with guys like Daniel Cormier and Khabib Nurmagomedov, and didn't perhaps exactly cash out like those guys did. But when you're getting paid from Tom Ford for doing the modeling, it's all Gucci, baby, because I'll tell you one thing, those three other gentlemen that I named at AKA ain't getting that job with Tom Ford. So congratulations, Luke Rockhold. Whether or not you put on the performance that you would have wanted to, you still prove to everybody that you're a man, that you're a warrior. And I think more or less that's what you were trying to show the world, and that's what you did, whether it was the performance that you could be proud of or not. So that's Luke Rockhold and Paulo Costa for you. And, that's what I got for you on the UFC front. Last week, we did 15 questions on the Q&A. It was a great success. Everybody loved the clips. I personally sent everybody their responses just to connect more with the viewers. They all loved the answers that I gave them. Shout out to everyone who watched the episode, liked the video, commented, subscribed. Shout out to my new followers on Instagram. Clips have been blowing up this week. Really proud of that. And, shout out to my guy, Brett, who's been killing it right now. He's sitting in the corner right now in the penalty box, as I like to call it. And with that, man, I got a couple of questions from a few viewers, so let's get into it. The first one is from my man Dale from Punch List MMA. He's got his own channel on YouTube, does a little bit of streaming, a little bit of MMA betting, and also some interviewing and analysis. And, we've been connecting lately, and he's a great guy. And he sent me a really well put voice message that I had to roughly transcribe. Can't say that I transcribed it in the best way, but I got the gist of the question. So here's my man Dale. Following Leon Edwards' knockout, was this fight a greatest of all time comeback or knockout? Or is this recency biasy? Love that question, man, because this is what I was thinking about this morning as I was rewatching the fight. Is that everyone on Twitter was saying, holy crap, this is such a big knockout. This is one of the biggest comebacks in UFC history. First of all, I didn't think Usman was beating Leon Edwards that badly. I think that Leon Edwards showed that he wasn't winning the fight, but he wasn't getting 10-8'd. He wasn't bloodied. He wasn't bruised. He wasn't battered. He looked fine. So I didn't think it was the biggest ass kicking in the world. That's number one. Number two, the biggest comeback in UFC title history is Anderson Silva versus Chael Sonnen, number one. Okay. Anderson Silva got beat up by Chael Sonnen for about 4.5 rounds before Silva busted out that triangle choke and retained his title. So I think this absolutely has to do with recency bias. MMA fans have that a lot. Ariel Helwani has been preaching it for years. MMA fans or combat sports fans in general are very, what have you done for me lately type of fans. More so MMA, actually. Boxing appreciates their history a little bit more. And, that's just the case for me. It's a very, what have you done for me lately sport. So I think that this is, in fact, recency bias. I think it was a great win, a great comeback, a great underdog story in beating the pound-for-pound best fighter with 56 seconds left when you're down 3 rounds on the scorecard. But, there's recency bias there, like I said. Anderson Silva versus Chael Sonnen is the best comeback fight in UFC history in a title fight. And, listen, I appreciate the excitement, but, not going to go down as one of the fights of the year either, which I saw some people preaching about. So, Dale, appreciate you, baby. Hope that answers your question. And I look forward to working with you in the future, my guy. So, appreciate you, Dale. Next question, we got Usman versus Leon 3 or Masvidal versus Leon. That's Andy. Appreciate you, Andy. Listen, I covered that a little bit before. As much as I would love to see the money fight in, or as I would like to say, the three-piece in a soda fight in Leon Rocky Edwards versus Jorge Masvidal. Masvidal sitting at number 9 with not really, that much of a winning streak going in his way. I think that it is in fact going to be a tough sell. Not that the UFC has went against the fans before or their wishes, but I think that it is in fact a tough sell. I think that we see Usman versus Leon 3. I think that Usman has clearly proven why he deserves a rematch. We've seen plenty of champions get immediate rematches before, and this shouldn't change either. So Usman versus Leon Edwards is the fight to make. And if for some reason that fight doesn't go on, I think that Colby Covington's been a little bit quiet, and I think it's time for him to turn up the volume a little bit. So thanks, Andy. Appreciate you, baby. Make sure you tune in to Andy's 100th episode on the Drew Experience. Cheers, buddy. You've been putting in a lot of work. You're a warrior. You're a resilient guy. I'm a dear friend of yours, and I appreciate you, Andy. So good shit. Thanks for the question. Next, we're going to move on, actually, to a little bit of fitness, which was a great question from Matt Heaton, which is a good friend of mine who plays for Rugby Canada, is also the assistant captain for the Atlanta Rattlesnakes in the MLR, which is the equivalent to the MLS, which is the American Soccer League, essentially. But for rugby inside of the United States, that's my man. He's asked me, how can incorporating some fighting fitness or wrestling/grappling improve other sports? We use a lot of wrestling work on levers for tackling. It's a great question. And I've also seen, to add to that, England Rugby implementing boxing inside of their conditioning sessions. And I think it's great. I mean, especially a sport like rugby where there's tackling and rucking. You're definitely going to have a lot of grappling and a lot of chaos going down throughout those movements. So I think the reason why we need to use wrestling and we need to use jiu-jitsu and judo inside of rugby is because not only do you start to learn how to really leverage an opponent and use your body in a more efficient manner to perhaps gain the position over your opposition, but also, conditioning. When I wrestle with some of my buddies just for a couple of seconds, it's crazy how exhausted they get because they have no idea what they're doing. Usually the best tactic is to just let your friend get as tired as possible when you, of course, know what you're doing, and then just take over and show them how it's done. Obviously, in a rugby game, you're not going to do that. So the importance to doing this wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and judo training is, in fact, to hone those techniques to then transfer them over to rugby. Another thing, too, is on the boxing side. Listen, I've seen England Rugby throw down with the boxing on the training field. The problem is that they're just throwing as many 1-2s and uppercuts as possible. They're just raising the heart rate, building up the lactic acid, and finding a way to tire out the upper body. But one of the main components to sports is being able to generate power from your feet and your hips. So if you're not actually teaching the players how to generate power from their feet and their hips when they're going for a tackle, when they're learning to throw a punch or they're going to grapple their opponents, they're not going to be able to efficiently implement it in a game. Now, I know that you're not supposed to box your opponents in a rugby game, but it does happen. But at the same time, if you are able to teach the players how to throw from the feet and from the hips more, not only will they work on the heart rate, the lactic acid, the coordination, the exhaustion in the upper body, and then the elevation of the heart rate, but they'll also learn to generate power from the feet and hips, which is kinetically the most optimal thing to do. So it's not only about getting the lads as tired as possible, it's about rooting them into the ground. Because when players go to scrum, when players go to lift a player up in the line out, when players go to break down in a tackle, they sink those fucking talons into the ground and they drive straight through, or they drive straight up through the sky. And that's coming from the feet and the hips. So fellas, if you're gonna be doing boxing, you're gonna be doing wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, in the rugby training field, make sure that you're breaking down those fundamentals to the purest T, implementing those grips, implementing those hips, and implementing those feet so that we could get the most optimal results. And there goes the sound of that bell, baby, and we're back for our last question of AC Radio's Q&A. Jordan asks, how has becoming a father recently affected your life? It's a great question because I think, when my clients ask me or my friends ask me, I tend to give them a very nonchalant response just because perhaps I don't want to pepper them with what's going on in my life. But when I'm in front of the cam, when I'm in front of the mic, this is my time to shine, baby. So I'm going to answer the question. I mean, how has it affected me? Feel more considerate these days. Obviously, I'm not naturally the type of person that puts myself first always, but especially with building the gym in my house and also having the podcast, there are a lot of things that I have made, a priority in my own life, and which kind of burdens other people's lives. But now that Hershey's back is with us, it just has made me feel that I have to be a lot more considerate. It's also made me feel a little bit more guilt, because when I go out with the boys to the Owls games and have a few, I know that my wife's sitting at home, doing the greatest job ever to take care of our son. So, you do get affected with a little bit of guilt, perhaps maybe because I'm Jewish also. We do live with that Jewish guilt. Ariel Hawani talks about it all the time, and, I resonate with that as well. But, just makes you feel a little bit more on your toes, a little bit more considerate, a little bit more in the game, a little bit more awake, and a little bit more aware. And those are all things that I've always wanted more of from myself. So, like I said on the last episode, and like I even titled it, I'm happier than ever, and that's how it's affected me. So, appreciate that question, my dude. And, last thing I just want to wrap this up with is, a lot of people are always looking for the next best thing, the next best spark, the next best, love, the next obsession, the next passion that they're going to find, but don't get it twisted. You got to see it through. Don't start something, do it for a couple of seconds because you didn't get immediate or instant gratification from it, and then move on to the next thing. Because you will then constantly be on that pursuit and constantly be left out in failure. Because anything that's really worth it will not give you instant gratification. Okay, think about things like junk food. Think about things like, one day of let's just start with junk food. Let's think about junk food. You get 5 seconds of pleasure, and then for the next 2 days, you're scolding yourself and you're telling everybody on how you had a cheat day. Okay, but then when you eat healthy, you don't feel that great in the short term, but then 1 to 2 weeks later, you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, looking good. So, what does that tell you? Anything worth it in life is not going to give you instant gratification. Okay? Look at some of these ladies and gentlemen that step into the ring in the octagon. Although they got obsessed with learning boxing or learning kickboxing or learning wrestling or learning jiu-jitsu, every single one of those fighters have a story where they were humbled and when they probably got their ass kicked. And that's what made them show up even more. So that instant gratification wasn't there, but perhaps the rush was, So don't always look towards that gratification, but look for how it makes you feel. It's not always being about successful on your first few tries. It's about doing, and it's about being consistent, and then it's about reaping the rewards of the rush that it gives you and that it makes you feel. Okay, so remember, if you're going to do something, see it through. If you want to quit a little bit of the way, there are going to be certain things in your life that you're like, yeah, I don't even know what the fuck I was thinking. That really wasn't for me, and that's fine. But I'm talking about the people, or I'm talking to the people that it's for everything. 1 second, they're a yogi, they're a vegan, they're a hiker, they're a carnivore, they're a power lifter, and they're just, for lack of a better term, touching the tip on everything. No, it's not the way we do things. Pick a lane, pick what you like, I ain't that hard to figure out, like podcasting, I like training people, I like my family, and I like my fights. What's your lane? And once you've picked that lane, stay in it. AC Radio, we're out.
Big Big G's, no design on my jacket. Work hard and I'm changing my bracket. Talk tough, we ain't hearing that racket. Dogs came and you know how to stack it. Take it wrong, but I'ma need my ends though. I got tigers on my chest like Kenzo. Rail came, yeah, he putting that Benz though. Carol's here, man, you know he stay 10 toes. Big dog, man, you know I ain't worried. Bent up, so I'm talking real slow.